to you and your family. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today to celebrate the 49th anniversary of the Fiscal Policy Office. As part of our mission, we study, analyze, and make policy recommendations. This process includes effective communication with people to ensure public awareness and understanding of government policies. Without your cooperation and collaboration, Fiscal Policy Office would not have come this far. So please think of this dinner as a birthday celebration of a member of your extended family, the 49 years old Fiscal Policy Office. As His Excellency Minister Gon has kindly agreed to preside over this gathering, please allow me to tell a little family tale. Most of us are familiar with his biography, especially his education and career path. However, some of you may not be aware of special relationship between the office and our beloved minister. Since the very beginning, His Excellency and Fiscal Policy Office have had a deep fraternal relation. Many years ago, as an economist freshly graduated from Long Island University with a master's degree, Mr. Graisi Jatikavanit, Mr. Gon's father, accepted a position at the Ministry of Finance. One of his tasks was to help in establishing an office responsible for shaping the policy framework for the ministry, and that was the Fiscal Policy Office. Mr. Graisi later on became the 6th Director General of the Fiscal Policy Office. So we can say that Mr. Gon and the Fiscal Policy Office are just like family. Even today, some senior officials still remember His Excellency in his childhood, a bright and determined kid. Mr. Gon never failed to amaze people with his sharp mind and diligence, much more profound than other children of his age. It could be fate or destiny that brought back His Excellency to the FPO family as our Minister of Finance. Since the very first day at the ministry, he has shown us his strong vision, a great asset to the Ministry of Finance. As an excellent communicator and role models for the new generation of politicians, Mr. Gon has taken great steps to bring together creativity and new media communication. He has shown us how to reach out to people, to every group in our country, young and old, rich and poor. Communication is the key to better understanding, especially in this virtually borderless era. His utilization of new media, be it social networks, internet broadcasting, or even television promos, greatly helps the ministry to reach out to the grassroots and gain awareness of the public. In fact, this evening's event is another endeavor for us to reach out and communicate the vision of the Ministry of Finance. Apart from the anniversary, this is surely another cause to celebrate. I'm glad to be a part of this new era of Thai society, where each party reaches out more to one another, to speak, to give, to share, and we are proud that we have His Excellency Minister Gon as the pioneer. Ladies and gentlemen, as the highlight of this evening draws near, it's time to close my remarks and welcome back His Excellency to his FPO family. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce our minister to share with us his vision on the agenda for the future of the Ministry of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't you join me and welcome His Excellency Minister Gon Jatikavanit.
Excellencies, past Director Generals of the Fiscal Policy Office, fellow members of the Ministry of Finance, friends and honored guests. First of all, allow me to thank you, Dr. Narit, for that very comforting introduction. It is indeed an honor for me to be in this position in my beloved ministry, and a special honor for me to be here at the celebration of the Fiscal Policy Office. Now, before I begin, I need to say that I've already committed a grave sin of being late. So I will not double up on my sins by also being long, so don't worry. But we come tonight for two purposes, as Dr. Narit introduced us to. The first is to obviously celebrate the 49th birthday of the Fiscal Policy Office, but the second purpose is also to discuss the economic challenges that we in Thailand face along with other countries around the globe. The FPO is 3 years older than I am, and as Dr. Narit mentioned just now, I was in fact born into the FPO family, as my father was one of the founding member staff of the Fiscal Policy Office and was attached to the Royal Thai Embassy in London as a financial counselor at the time that I was born. I recall in my youth stories of great daring do by members of the FPO, probably exaggerated greatly by my father, my late father, but perhaps consistent with the pioneering days of FPO at that time. But the way my father told me, the Fiscal Policy Office was the most important institution in the country. And indeed, every other institution, especially the Bank of Thailand, only served as its supporting staff. And I trust Mom Tau's allegiance remains with the FPO, not with the Bank of Thailand. But in truth, we know that the Fiscal Policy Office, as the brain of the Ministry of Finance, has had its ups and downs. I have already been working very closely with two excellent past Director Generals. The first, when I came on board, was Dr. Somchai Sachapong, who now looks after the Office of the State Enterprises. The second, Kun Sathit Rangkasiri, who is now the Director General of the Revenue Department. And indeed, I've also had the good fortune of working with two permanent secretaries already, both of whom have been excellent, both of whom, of course, were past Director Generals of the Fiscal Policy Office. In fact, conventional wisdom in the Ministry of Finance has it that you can only be successful as a permanent secretary if you have been a Director General of the FPO. Now, the jury is thus out on Dr. Aripong, whose only weakness, as far as I can see, is that he was never at the FPO. But I wouldn't worry too much. I think that particular conventional wisdom was made up by FPO staff anyway. Now, on to the economy. It is 8:15 p.m. and far too late for us to be going into too much detail about the country's economic challenges. So I will be brief. But there are 4 mega trends that are affecting every country in the world that I think all of us here in Thailand, especially those of us who are working at the FPO, need to be aware of. The first is the fact that there is increasing free competition in the world, and that higher level of free competition is leading to fiercer level of competition amongst countries. There are now 450 FTAs in operation, an increase over the past 10 years of over 350%. That increased level of free trade also translates to both opportunities and threats as competition also arises. The second megatrend is the increasing level of volatility in the global financial markets. The statistics really tells all. In terms of flow of funds across borders, in 1990, the total cross-border flow of funds totaled to $1 trillion, or an equivalent to about 4.8% of global GDP at that time. The level of cross-border financial flow in the year 2010 is likely to top $12 trillion, or over 20% of global GDP. There's just simply a lot more money flowing across borders. Not only that, in terms of value of financial assets in the world, in 1990, there were a total of $43 trillion worth of financial assets in existence in all the countries, or equivalent to about just under 200% of global GDP. Today, the total value of financial assets tops $200 trillion mark, or over 350% of GDP. So it is not surprising, therefore, that there is an increasing level of financial contagion. Not surprising that when we had our financial crisis in 1997, there was barely a ripple across the globe. But now that Greece is in trouble, now that there was a subprime crisis, that particular impact was felt right across the globe, including, of course, on the shores of Thailand. The third megatrend that we need to be aware of is the aging society. In total, of the world's population today, 8% is what you would call aged. This will increase by the year 2050 by over 100% to a level estimated to be closer to around 17%. In Thailand, the situation is actually more challenging. The current percentage of our population that is retired is already at the 11% level. And we expect that within 20 years, this number will double to around 22%, thus posing serious challenges on issues related to economic productivity and threats of increasing level of poverty amongst the retired. The final megatrend, of course, and the final challenge globally is the issue of the impact of the changing environment, the impact of global warming, the impact of the troublesome industrial waste. All of this will have a profound impact on economic competition, and we can expect that non-tariff barriers related to issues concerning global warming will become a genuine threat and a genuine issue towards competition and free trade. For Thailand, these megatrends will have an impact on issues related to our competitiveness, both in industry as well as in services. And in service industry, tourism particularly is an area that will be particularly challenged by the changing global environment. There is also going to be a dependence upon a higher level of importance of an efficient agro industry, not least in order to feed the higher level of income generated by the urbanization trends that are taking place around the world, particularly in Asia. There will be also a higher level of dependence on investment as a growth driver, and in that also the need to continue to attract foreign capital as an important economic driver for Thailand. We are already challenged fiscally. This year we have record fiscal budget of 2 trillion baht, but in terms of government revenues, that is barely sufficient to cover current expenses. And the investment undertakings that are required by the government is going to be entirely financed by borrowings. We will need to increasingly depend on private sector funding in order to ensure that we reach our goal of having a balanced budget in 5 years' time. Given all of this, there are 3 pillars of ensuring sustainable development for Thailand in the foreseeable future. The first pillar, of course, is the need to have a sustainable economic growth. By sustainable economic growth, we are tasked to look after issues related to inflation, issues related to the need to maintain sufficient level of international reserves, issues related to the need to maintain the sanctity and strength of the financial sector, and we've all learned the lessons, not only in 1997 of having a weak financial sector, but the rest of the world has also learned this same lesson over the past 2 years. There is also a need for us, especially at the Ministry of Finance, to ensure that we have fiscal stability in order to ensure sustainable economy going forward. The government and the country as a whole need to make significant investment in infrastructure Tomorrow, for example, there is a significant issue that will be considered by Parliament, whereby the government will be requesting approval for the government to move towards signing an MOU, negotiating an MOU with the government of China in order for the two governments to co-invest in a very significant high-speed train, linking the train route that China will be building through Laos, down through to Bangkok, and then further down to the Malaysian border. In order to ensure economic sustainability, we also need to ensure that we have a fair tax structure, a competitive tax structure, and that is a specific task of those of us who work in the Fiscal Policy Office and the Ministry of Finance as a whole. We need to ensure ongoing development of the capital market and the financial sector in order for our corporates to be able to raise funding as competitively as possible. And we also need to ensure that the grassroots economy is also strengthened. The second pillar after ensuring sustainable economy is ensuring sustainable society. And here the main challenge, especially for those of us here at the Ministry of Finance, is to ensure that there is equal opportunity for all Thais. Here, the government and the Ministry of Finance has been working hard in order to ensure that there is equal access to financial resources, but there are other issues related to equal access to quality education, equal access to quality healthcare, and equal access to usage of land, all of which are challenges that the country faces in the next several years. And the third pillar, in order to ensure sustainable growth for the country as a whole, is to ensure that there is a sustainable environment as a result of the growth process that we will be seeing. The Ministry of Finance has, of course, been providing financial tools to incentivize due care of the impact of the environment on the part of the private sector. Recently, we passed a couple of important potential pieces of legislation through Cabinet as a result of recommendations from the Fiscal Policy Office in this area. So all of these, in summary, ladies and gentlemen, are challenges that poses for the Fiscal Policy Office. And as the FPO reaches the age of 50, it is particularly important for all of its members to ensure that the collective wisdom that it has gathered over that period is combined with youthful energy in order to ensure that it is indeed a significant institution in Thailand. But judging by some of the work in terms of legislation that the FPO has recommended that the government pass through the parliamentary process lately, and I will highlight two. One, the property and asset tax, and secondly, the piece of legislation that will allow the creation of the National Savings Fund. I think perhaps based on these two highly significant pieces of legislation that were prepared by the FPO, my father perhaps was correct all along, and perhaps the Fiscal Policy Office is indeed the most important institution in the country, and my wish is that it remains so for the next 50 years. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Your Excellency. To continue our agenda, I would like to request Mr. Peter Elliott, Country Head and City Country Officer, Citibank Thailand, to chair the Q&A session. Mr. Elliott, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for agreeing to a Q&A session. I appreciate that, and also for very insightful, substantive, and always concise remarks. At this point, we'd like to open it up to the room for questions. Those of you, I believe there's a microphone in the room. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I think you've done a pretty good job.
Only because people who work in the Ministry of Finance knows that they shouldn't ask the minister about the baht.
Let me start it off with a question that is not controversial for the central bank or the Ministry of Finance, and that is financial inclusion. You mentioned financial inclusion just now, and the ripple effects that would have across the society. Could you expand on those remarks, please, in terms of how the Ministry of Finance can go about encouraging that and making that happen in terms of expanding financial inclusion, please?
We almost look upon it as a basic right, the right to access finance on reasonable terms. The Bank of Thailand estimate that there are about 15% of the adult population in Thailand who have no access to formal financing, but they measure that in terms of having access to deposit accounts. If you were to look at it in terms of the possibility of borrowing money through the formal banking sector, the percentage of the population that are excluded from the system is probably double that. So we've been working hard to address this issue. We've tried to provide some immediate help to the tail end of those who have been shut out and have been forced to borrow from loan sharks. And of course, so far we've managed to transfer those loans into the formal sector by the tune of around 500,000 individual accounts, which is very significant work in about 6 months' time. What is equally significant, actually, is that I've asked the state-owned banks involved in this process to closely follow and track delinquent loans for signs of NPLs that might emerge out of this process. And I received the first report just a few days ago based upon data gathered over the past 3 months. And the total number, for example, of NPLs in this particular scheme at the Bank of Agriculture, who I think looked after over half of the total 500,000 that were transferred, was one single NPL, which is quite remarkable. The same story goes for the Government Savings Bank and others. So I think that supports the logic that the Ministry of Finance had from the start, that if these individuals were willing and able to pay as much as 20% interest per month, then surely they can afford to pay 1% interest to our state-owned banks. So we'll be extending this. We now have a clear strategy on the part, particularly of the Bank of Agriculture and the Government Savings Bank, of how they will plan to provide better access to loans to individuals who have previously been shut out of the banking system. Peter, you know, of course, that we're also planning to provide attached financial services to the postal system. Currently, they have over 1,200 branches around the country, way more than the biggest bank in terms of number of branches. And we think it's an attractive idea that they should also be providing grassroots financial services and are open to ideas from those of you who are in the private sector as to how they might go about it.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Yes.
May I ask one thing? My name is Kagami. I'm from Bangkok Research Center, JETRO. I am a Japanese. You mentioned about Chinese sort of, railway road from Bangkok to Malaysia. That is a kind of, Yunnan to Malaysia or to Singapore. That is a north-south route. How about east-west route, especially Ho Chi Minh, Phnom Penh, Bangkok, and Dawei or Thabo in Myanmar?
Yes.
And I think that Italian Thai here already sent 70 persons to make a feasibility study at Thaboi, Dawei. And I think that recently I read the newspaper that Thai government also decided to invest the kind of route, highway route to Myanmar. And I think that is very important because not only Thailand, but also another countries to make a route to India, to Europe more efficiently. You just go to Singapore or go to Europe or India, but just from Vietnam to Yangon, or Myanmar, that's more effective. So how do you think of it?
Kakami-san, you outlined government policy, actually. Indeed, after decades of trying to answer the question as to where we would build our Andaman Seaside deep seaport, we decided that there was no single place that is as appropriate as Tavoy. So we will be supporting Tavoy as the main outlet for us to the Western markets. We will be needing to invest in infrastructure that will support that. The first step is to invest in road infrastructure, but you're absolutely correct. The east-west rail link will be something that should definitely follow. I believe the Chinese government is also building railroad down from north to south to Tavoy, so there should be a strong link up there, and we're obviously open to Japanese financing on this particular project. And that the World Bank would do just as well. So that is our aim, and indeed that is our strategy. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, JP.
Just a question. This afternoon, I'm from the Asian Development Bank. This afternoon we had a very interesting presentation by different economists from Citibank. And in the statistic they presented, there was one area which I don't talk much about, is that the fiscal deficits in industrial countries are magnitudes I don't remember. I've been an economist for quite some time, but like minus 7%, 7%, 8, 9% of GDP, huge deficits. And the economists didn't mention much about the risk that represents. So what I would like to ask you is, do you see how concerned are you about these kind of figures? You were in the IMF meeting and the World Bank meeting last week, but it looks to me that is something we haven't seen in a long time. Yes. And we don't know how it's going to come out with.
Okay.
My question.
First of all, from a Thailand perspective, answering that question, we had spent last year equivalent to about 8.5% of GDP in terms of fiscal stimuli. So that's increasing national debt by about that much. But because we were lucky in able to achieve almost 10% growth rates on our GDP, we managed to retain the total national debt as a percentage of GDP to roughly the same level as it was a year ago. So we were able to stimulate the economy without actually relatively increasing the total amount of debt. That is a rare achievement and something that helps ensure that we have fiscal space in case things turn for the worse. But also a level of stability, probably also leading to the strength in the currency that we're seeing today. Globally, obviously, the level of total fiscal deficit and national debt as a percentage of the global GDP has increased. Having said that, I'm of the school that is less concerned about that at this stage than I am about a double dip and a potential deflation. I watch with concern, for example, the governments of the United Kingdom slamming on the brakes with the change in government, the way that they're currently doing. I worry that the fall off in level of global demand will have a much more severe impact on growth, job creation, and global economy than allowing perhaps another year or two of fiscal injection into the global economy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Matthew Verghese from the World Bank. I'll join your colleagues, Minister, in being discreet enough not to ask about the baht. If I can ask a longer-term question. You identified 4 megatrends. Taking those into consideration and also the sort of post-global crisis world that Thailand is going to face. What are going to be the elements of the growth strategy for Thailand in this brave new world?
I think especially with the strengthening currency and given U.S. economic policy options, it is almost inevitable that the U.S. dollar will continue to weaken against all currencies. I think at the juncture whereby we need to make a significant decision on economic reform. I mean, if you look back to 1997, 1998, when baht weakened by about a half, it was really a no-brainer. Our economy became much more export-driven. It was about 30%, 35% in value terms as a percentage share of GDP. It peaked at close to 70% a year ago. So, we became manufacturers of goods to the rest of the world using our relatively cheap currency. Well, now that era is over, and it's over rather quickly. So, very quick restructuring and rethinking needs to take place. My view is perhaps it might be useful, and I know it's not entirely compatible, for us to look back to what Japan had to do with respect to the Plaza Accord in 1985 that led to the strengthening of the yen. That was when, of course, they started investing and diversifying their manufacturing bases to lower cost destinations, and Thailand obviously was a major recipient of that flow of investment. With the advent of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, I think Thai business and industrial sector in particular needs to start looking outward much more aggressively than they have been forced to over the past 10 years. I think if we don't become aggressive in making overseas investment within our immediate neighboring countries, we will be losing out on a major opportunity that is given to us. And beyond ASEAN, I think we need to immediately also think about BIMSTEC and the opportunities that afford. And I've been advised, for example, that perhaps we should almost immediately be thinking of markets beyond that in Africa, where we could still make significant inroads. So I think the need for Thailand and the Thai corporate sector in particular to look outwards much more aggressively is something that we need to do. Back to Tavoy, I met with an industrial estate developer, a Thai industrial estate developer, and I was very intrigued to hear that not only is, as you imagine, Itau Thai making infrastructure investments into Tavoy, but this particular industrial estate developer has bought land and is making an industrial estate in order to receive the industries that will be attracted to Tavoy as well. We need to do more of that. And now that there are Thai operators of industrial estates in Vietnam and soon in Tavoy and elsewhere, Thai businesses should find it easier also to make inroads. The Thai government, the Ministry of Finance, has already been tasked to look at what measures are needed in order to help incentivize and there I use the word subsidize Thai companies into making these necessary investments as well.
Is there one more question? I know there is one more question, please.
Oh no, you're going to ask me about healthcare costs.
Yeah, this is the economist.
What you see happening to Thai workforce, how do you sustain their incomes? You seem to be taking very good care of the capital owners, but what about the Thai workers?
Okay. Thank you for that. In fact, I met with the so-called, the question Dr. Amar asked was how we were intending to look after the Thai workforce, because most of what I've been addressing are issues related to the capital owners. That is correct. I like to say that this morning I met with the associations related to the private sector in Thailand, all three main associations, the Chamber of Trade, the Sapa Usahakam, and the Banking Association. And of course, we talked about issues that are of concern to them. But one of the issues I did raise was the fact that there have been studies that has shown that since the financial crisis of 1997-1998, the corporate income tax that the Revenue Department has collected from Thai firms has increased by more than 200%. That's indicative of the level of profitability that we've seen in the private sector over the past 10, 11 years. But during that same period, real income measured by the minimum wage has actually been negative by about 3%. The potential short summary of that data is that most of the gains of the economic recovery that we've seen since 1997-1998 has been accruing to the capital owners and not been passed along or fairly shared with the workers that have been supporting that economic development. So I left this with them today, discussed this issue, and raised the subject of wages. You will have seen that the Prime Minister has asked that the private sector consider granting minimum wage of 250 baht per day, which I believe your institution, TDRI, was one that analyzed is the minimum required in order for them to be able to eke out reasonable living. Of course, they have been fighting us tooth and nail. And what I told them was, if they continue to do that without rationale and reason, and debate it with us in good faith, what will happen is that there will be ex-prime ministers who will come along and offer 300 baht per day, which in fact is what happened last week. And then where will they be? So it is a subject that is actually very close to our hearts. And believe you me, as politicians, we do a lot better keeping workers happy than keeping capital owners happy. And so looking after the Thai workers is a key challenge for us as a government and also for the Ministry of Finance. And I can say also that the FPO in particular has done very well on this issue. One of the pieces of legislation that I referred to just now, that was one of the first thing that Dr. Somchai, when he was running this office, proposed to me as a new minister almost 2 years ago that I should focus on, which is the creation of the National Savings Fund. For those of you who are not familiar with this, the National Savings Fund is a fund that will allow informal sector workers, of which there totals 26 million in Thailand, not currently covered by social security system and not a member of the civil service, therefore with no safety net, no pension scheme available to them on retirement. The creation of this fund will allow them to begin saving today and have their savings matched by the government to the maximum level of 100 baht per month. This will ensure that they receive reasonable pension on retirement at the age of 60. Again, I think this is a testimony to the level of commitment that we have towards raising the living standards of workers here in Thailand. And perhaps already we need to think beyond that. Aging society means that over the next 10 to 15 years, in order to maintain the level of productivity, we have to increase labor productivity by probably around 25% from where it is today. And there is the issue of foreign workers that is already problematic in Thailand and will increasingly be an issue that needs to be properly addressed by Thai society. That still has no clear answer. So there are plenty of issues related to labor that we need to continue to work with. And I think Dr. Ammar's question is a call to arms to all of us who are at the Ministry of Finance to maintain our priority in addressing that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I think it's been a long day for you, and we join Dr. Naris in extending, all of us extending our heartfelt condolences to you on this day. We also join everybody in this room, and I'm certain the minister as well from his remarks, a happy birthday celebration to the Fiscal Policy Office. Congratulations. Citibank is very grateful for being asked to help support this evening's event, and we look forward to doing the same for you next year. Thank you very much. Thank you. And Dr. Naris, thank you.
And now Director General of the Fiscal Policy Office will present an appreciation to Your Excellency Minister of Finance. And I hope you all have a great time as our celebration of the 49th anniversary of the Fiscal Policy Office draws to a close. I would like to extend our gratitude to our guests of honor, Your Excellency Gon Jatikawanit, and all of you. Thank you. ขอบคุณค่ะ So, because for you all, you haven't finished your dessert, so dessert will coming next after this, sorry. And please enjoy your dessert.